Hi, I'm Zach Singerman, and welcome to the Gen Z Jews Learning from Leaders series. In this series, I'm interviewing national leaders on the topics of anti-Semitism, Israel, and leadership. Today, our guest is Ethan Felson, the executive director of A Wider Bridge. A Wider Bridge works to create equality in Israel and expanding the LGBTQ inclusion through education, advocacy, relationship building, and grant making. Mr. Felson, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Zach. It's great to be with you.
So, first off, could you just tell Gen Z Jews a little bit about yourself and A Wider Bridge?
Sure. I've been a professional in the LGBTQ and Jewish community since I was right out of college, which is a few decades ago. I've worked in Jewish Community Relations Council, directing one in Hartford, Connecticut. I've worked at the Federation there. I was the senior vice president of the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, which is a national body, and then at Jewish Federations of North America, where I directed an Israel Action Network. And I've been in A Wider Bridge since July, but involved with a group for much longer than that. It's a group that's very near and dear to my heart. And A Wider Bridge is really a unique organization. It sits at the nexus of the LGBTQ community and the Jewish community, although our supporters, our members, our leaders are both LGBTQ and allies, Jewish and allies. We work for equality in Israel, so fighting for LGBTQ inclusion in Israel. We support about a dozen LGBTQ organizations in Israel, and we build a strong bridge between the community here and the community there. We work for equality for Israel. So we try to shape a more positive conversation about Israel in the LGBTQ community and the progressive world and beyond. And we work for justice for everyone. So we fight for LGBTQ rights, for racial justice. We take on transphobia, and we build a broad coalition.
And could you just explain some of the programs that A Wider Bridge has and how they're really impactful in helping?
Sure. So our signature program through the years has been missions. We've brought hundreds of leaders from North America to Israel to introduce them to Israel, introduce them to the LGBTQ community, and then we have a wonderful alumni network beyond the bridge of those alumni that we stay in conversation with, help to answer their questions, and help them in advocacy and other work. Now, during the COVID era, a lot of this transformed, and we'll talk a little bit, I hope, about some of the ways that has happened. We've done a wonderful series of virtual missions. Another program series that we have that is virtual is A Wider Lens. So for the past couple of months, we've had a program series with films and books and all kinds of cooking classes and other things that connect between North America and Israel through a cultural lens. And we also have an action center. So for instance, we're just about to do an action alert of people saying, we have a real concern that there may be an Israeli coalition with groups that are homophobic, misogynist, racist, and we have a deep concern about that. So we say no hate in the coalition.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know this may be a little bit of a tough question, but today in the larger progressive community, Israel is not really viewed positively. How do you really navigate around that?
It's a great question, Zach. The first thing that I say is, with all of this, we can't paint an entire segment, progressives, with one broad brush. Mm-hmm. There's actually very, very significant support for Israel in the progressive space. I think we also have to remember that the fact that somebody has a passionate concern for Palestinians doesn't mean that they're anti-Israel. Mm-hmm. And it's important for us to be and to help people understand how they can be both and. I'd say most importantly, you have to keep your eyes facing forward. There are always going to be people who sit at the ends of the political spectrum, as it were, who oftentimes are a lot of the noise. And if you take your eyes and focus only on people who are the strongest, most vociferous detractors, you forget that right in front of you is a broad swath of people who want to do the right thing, who will relate very positively to the Jewish story, to the work that Israelis are doing to build a fair and decent society, who may need more information, for whom a conversation that starts from a place of empathy, for whom the Palestinian story is important too, and helping to evidence how we can lift up the narratives of the people in the land, and particularly help them to understand, in terms of our perspective, that Israel is a truly remarkable society when it comes to LGBTQ inclusion. Not perfect, and no society is perfect. I'm a proud American, and I can look at America and see there's a lot of unfinished business here, perhaps more than there used to be a few years ago. And there is unfinished business in Israel, and we want to be part of that story. And it's a progressive imperative. The Jewish story of our return to sovereignty in our ancestral homeland is a progressive story. It is a liberation story, and we're happy to share that story, but it has to be done in a way that, again, lifts up and doesn't tear down.
Mm-hmm. And, is it really challenging, and what is the challenge for a wider bridge for the parts of the Jewish community that are not as accepting of the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, that great question, Zach. I think that's a big piece of our mandate, to be able to showcase who we are, to be able to show people the rich diversity of the LGBTQ landscape. Again, you don't want to take your eyes away from the noise that comes from the side, but I know from having been involved in LGBTQ rights for more than 30 years, it's incremental, and it comes from education. It also comes from fighting and from being at rallies and protests and writing letters and being with members of Congress and the likes of that. And the same thing is true. With the Jewish story, it's part of our DNA to be advocates and stand for ourselves. And it is the case, I know, in the Jewish community, there are people who aren't used to having to figure out how to speak about pronouns and how to understand the varieties of gender identity, gender expression, that's sometimes different from sex assigned at birth, helping people to understand that there's a difference between who somebody is physically attracted to and emotionally attracted to. And those are conversations that we try to have with people, and it's really quite remarkable. Something amazing happens in our universe when we're introducing people to LGBTQ Israelis, and they start to see the rich diversity that happens there. Sometimes they become more aware of what's happening even in our North American landscape. And there are just so many stunning leaders of these organizations in Israel. Ma'avarim, which works in the trans community, what the different pride centers. And it's interesting, in Israel, the LGBTQ community centers are called pride centers. So helping people understand what the proud community is and its rich diversity, and that we are, as with here, your family. That's part of our conversation, and we actually find a fairly significant degree of cooperation across a very, very broad spectrum in the landscape, and where there are people who react with hostility to us because we're LGBTQ. We push back, and we've got a lot of allies. We have a lot of friends, and there's power in that.
And How has a wider bridge really worked throughout the pandemic, and how has it really affected the progress of the nonprofit?
These are hard times. We're a relationship-based organization. We're used to having conversations. We bring people together in educational forums, in parlor meetings, at big galas, and especially through missions. But there's also opportunity in the fact that we've learned how to connect in a virtual environment. And so we've just had our fourth virtual mission to Israel. And we might do a regular mission for 20 to 30 people every 3 or 4 months, every 6 months. We've done a virtual mission every single month. The last one we had just had 50 people on it. And it was 4 days of programming with senior Israeli leaders. This particular mission was for LGBTQ elected and appointed officials. So we had state representatives, state senators, mayors, very senior people in elected life who got to have a close-up conversation with the leaders of the Israeli LGBTQ community, with the member of Knesset, with the mayors of towns in Israel, deputy mayors, the likes of that, and with thought leaders. So the virtual world is actually good for that. We did one, we had 30 different LGBTQ organization leaders from the United States and Canada, and similarly we had an opportunity to examine racial justice, to examine the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through virtual, as well as that a wider bridge session. We had a book launch, over 1,000 people were with us for the launch of Ben Freeman's book, Jewish Pride. And so there's the fact that we work across such a vast landscape and people are willing to come together in this virtual environment. We're very excited about Pride this year. We're sad that we won't be able to be together at Pride rallies and at Israel Day parades. We're not going to let that stop us. We're going to have a virtual rally. We're calling it Proud and we're going to say, what's on your side? I'm proud and progressive. I'm proud and pro-Israel. I'm proud and feminist. I'm proud and trans. I'm proud and Zionist. Allowing people to show their multiple commitments and coming together. If we can't be together in person, we'll be together virtually. But we're also recognizing that Israel is now vaccination, right? It's the first society that is now past this this vaccination stage. They've removed the outdoor mask mandate, and now they're going to have people who are going to be together during Pride Month. Maybe not big rallies, but people will be out and about. So we're going to, sometimes if you're in one city and there's a Pride rally or an Israel Day parade in the next city, you get in a bus and you go there. So we're going to say, come on a bus with us. We're going to go to Tel Aviv Pride and ask people to come along with us and see what's happening in Israel for Tel Aviv Pride, which happens to be the largest, in normal times, the largest Pride rally in the Middle East. And will be, there will probably be Pride events in as many as 40 or 50 different cities and towns in Israel.
Wow.
In 2021. Maybe not in person. They may have a lot of different events, but Israel isn't just about Tel Aviv, but we're certainly on Tel Aviv Pride, June 11th. We're going to be there.
Cool. Well, Mr. Felson, thank you so much for being here today. It was really great having you and talking with you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, and it's Ethan. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.